I'd love just to say hi to each and every one of you, Melanie, Carrie, and Marie. And perhaps you can just say hi and like how you came to this work. Maybe how much you know about the Enneagram would be good. Um, that would be good. That'd be useful. Because we're going to go into that quite a bit, but also it's going to be a fresh take on it.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Melanie. I'm a French, as you can probably tell, uh, human design engine key expert, and I am very new to the Enneagram part. So I just redid the test to be sure, and I'm like 75% like eight. So I'm an eight. We are sure about that.
Well, you're 75% of any. Okay, cool. That's
Yeah.
interesting. I may have some words to say on that, because my perspective is quite different from a personality profiling tool. Certainly you are an eight right now, right? Or you have that perhaps dominant in your nature. Um, but yeah, part of what the Shadow Keys is offering is that identity of the eight is like an ongoing evolution, and that changes as you grow and evolve. And what this work does is going to give you some understanding of your natural paths for evolution or involution as well. Um, Beautiful, Melanie.
In human design, so I am a 6-2 emotional generator. And
So
my son is in 61.
Sun is in 61. Okay, beautiful. Thank you, Melanie. Any of the others available for a little chat? Maybe a video? You turn on your video and or at least voice and introduce yourself.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Carrie.
I have no memory of signing up for this or anything. It just woke me up at 2 a.m. and here I am.
Okay.
I've known about Enneagrams for more than 10 years, but
Mhm.
I've never really studied it or really understood it. I am also an eight in human design gene keys. I'm a 6-2 projector.
Okay.
Um, gosh, I'm just I don't know how this came to me or anything. It's like I'm following some guidance here. This is say, okay, get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and see what this is. So I guess, excited to be here in this unexpected moment in time. Wow.
That's great, Carrie. You're not the first to have done that. Last session, we had someone waking up 4 a.m. in the hospital and came and joined us as well. But yeah, this is great. Great to have you. And two eights. This is very interesting. It was the last one that I was working right up to the point here because I've actually been away for most of the time. I'm not really prepared. It's all in me. I'm just not very good at doing slides, but there's plenty of information here, and we'll do it rather intuitively and listening. Obviously, eight's going to be an important thing here, so I can't wait to share with you, and also to receive your insights as to how you feel about it. So I'm going to talk very briefly just to give some context about what the Shadow Keys is and what it's offering and how it differs from the original transmissions of Ra, Uruha, who brought in human design. And I guess I'm choosing to highlight this because Enneagram, this Shadow Keys is founded on the human design. It kind of puts the Enneagram lens over human design or puts the human design lens over Enneagram to reveal new information and new insight and new depth. Um, but what inspired the Shadow Keys in the first place was this insight that human design shows our authentic blueprint. It shows who we're designed to be, programmed to be, and it offers ways to decondition so that we can actually begin to embody that true nature or that blueprint that we've got designed within us. Um, and while it does that, um, the standard offering doesn't talk so much. It mentions the not self, but it doesn't go into the depth that the Enneagram does. And so the Enneagram is like if the human design is the blueprint for who we are, for our true self, then Enneagram is more about the conditioning, the not self, the who we learn to be as opposed to our uniqueness. Because whereas human design claims to be offer the detail, the complexity to show how we're unique, really Enneagram offers 9 patterns of behavior. So it's not about uniqueness, it's about sameness. And so for me, what I intuited there that there's a journey there to be had. And for me, the Enneagram was a great gateway. Um, yeah, a great gateway. Because you can really see your conditioning, your patterning, or your not self very easily. As soon as you read the profiles, it's like saying you identify with all the qualities and the behaviors described in the Enneagram. They're very relatable, and it's like I think a common phenomenon everyone experiences when they read the profile for the first time, especially in their earlier years when they're less individuated, I'd say, less differentiated. You know, like especially I read it in my 20s or late 20s, early 30s. And so I could see so much type 7 in me, for example. It was like shocking. I was like, oh, that's me. But that was my not self saying that's me, because that was really just one of 9. But I had identified with these patterns of behavior. And so I find that very interesting. And so, whereas human design is like saying, hey, look at your uniqueness, Shadow Keys is kind of more reversed. It's saying, hey, look at your not self, actually, as a way to reinforce your uniqueness or discern what is you and what is not you, like your true self, your essence that wants to come through. Um, yeah, so human design focuses on the vehicle, like the body we're in. Enneagram is on the mind. It focuses on psychology, at least the version that came to us in the 1950s. The symbol itself is a lot older. It came, I can even bring up some basic stuff that would be helpful. This is an old one I had before the Shadow Keys, but the symbol itself is said to be around for 2,500 years or more. It's got mystical, unknown origins, but it comes from Gurdjieff, who brought it to us in the 1920s, is a mystic, and he's said to have received it when it is time with the Sufis and learning about the Kabbalah and other mystical. And yeah, but it was in the 1950s, it was retooled by some of Gurdjieff's students to look at psychology, modern psychology, and 9 personality types, of which are very powerful. And the Shadow Keys does very little to change. It adds a lot, I would say, to the 9 personality types, but it doesn't retract anything, because those 9 personality types are patterns of nature and they're very powerful. If anything, what while this focuses, particularly the work of Claudio Naranjo and those, they focus really on the behavior psychology and psychological traits, whereas the Shadow Keys goes into more holistic depth into the body and different types of like physical, like it's not just even your soul. The Shadow Keys looks at as having a personality of sorts. So the human design really helps add that depth that's just not present in your traditional Enneagram teachings. But yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit about that. Traditionally, it's split into 3. We have 8, 9, and 1, which are the instinctive triad, developed in response to lack of safety. So the 8, 9, and 1 are all to do with, addressing fears of being unsafe, of fears of violation, of boundaries, and safety, basically. And so they all assert a form of power, very different forms of power, and they're not self, I guess, or their protection is rage or anger. That's the 8, 9, and 1, the instinctive triad. So we're going to look at that later. But esoterically, beyond, the childhood wounds that create these patterns, we can also use the instinct to try to actually access the gut and our power, and not just from a physical level, but esoteric energetic level, we're all powerful or multidimensional beings. And so we can use it to go beyond. Oh, we got a raised hand. Yes, Marie. Is there a question?
It's Carrie.
Oh, Carrie.
Yeah, is there any way for you to zoom in on your slides a little bit so that we can actually, I can't read them?
Okay, sure. Thanks for saying.
Thank you.
And
Oh, here we go.
And feel free to jump in. I'm still a bit of a noob when it comes to presentation. I'm sure, this is one of my earliest ones, so I'm sure I'll improve. But yeah, thanks for saying, and feel free to jump in at any time with questions. I really want this to be an interactive thing, so I don't talk too much. Um, but yeah, so looking at, maybe I'll just jump to this and I'll go back to it. So one of the kind of ways that I like, a lot of what I do with the shadow keys is kind of reframe knowledge or information for new insights. It's actually, this is not new, but I like to think it gives a new perspective. So the personality here is talked about as being a protector. It came about to protect us, originally as a way to interface with reality, and to get what we want and what we need. But it's also to protect us from painful emotions. But it's not who we really are, it's our way of interacting, our way of expressing. And we often, we'll say this. Each personality type employs a different strategy to protect us from a particular brand of pain we experienced in childhood. Most of our behavior stems from the strategy. So the idea is that the personality by default is a conditioned strategy. It's not authenticity, it's a strategy in order to get our unmet needs met. And those unmet needs are around safety, as I said, with the 8, 9, and 1, love with the 2, 3, and 4, and security, which is the 5, 6, and 7. Okay. And security is different from safety, but it's similar, but it's just what the mind needs to feel safe, right? Rather than like physical safety. So basically safety and love, they're the most important things for a developing child. But now that we're no longer experiencing the pain of childhood or even past lives, we no longer need the strategy. So the Enneagram shows us how to get out of these dysfunctional patterns of behavior. And that's what the symbol is really for. And that is what Gurdjieff, the mystic who brought it, taught. It's not what the commercial Enneagram schools teach. They talk about identifying yourself, understanding yourself so you can accept yourself and you can grow. And that's great. And they can grow into a healthier personality. It's not so much taught about transcending the personality or really breaking out of the limited or not self or the small self. So, for example, let's talk about the head triad, the 5, 6, and 7, which is my dominant type. I now am a 5. I'm expressing as a 5, but there was a time, my 20s to early 30s, I was fully a 7, and 5 was not present whatsoever. I was fully what we call fixated or identified with the 7 identity, because I needed it. Like I needed it for my life. I was still hungry because the 7, like um there's even in the gene keys, there's the 35 of hunger, right? That's really epitomizes 7, right? They're hungry for experience, they're hungry for love, they're hungry for pleasure because there's a deep emptiness within them. And their life, while you're empty and you've not really been filled spiritually, let's say, or healed, you're going to be hungry and you're going to keep seeking fulfillment and pleasure. And so that's what my 20s was. I was insatiable for it, and I was good at it. And I didn't want to change because that was meaningful for me to do that. But I was, I guess, fortunate to have an enlightening experience at the peak of that. I really fulfilled my 7's hunger. And with an enlightening experience. It was psychedelically induced, but I had an enlightening experience, like a heaven on earth experience, and I became full, and I didn't need to chase pleasure anymore. I felt satisfied. Something in me was truly satiated, and I didn't need to be that person anymore. It didn't feel fulfilling to pursue that anymore. I was like, oh, I'm done. I'm complete. And immediately, almost overnight, I became a five, the very beginnings of a five, hungry for knowledge, interested in the inner world and what was going on. First of all, I had a mystical experience, which I had to try and explain now, which I never really thought of anything outside of my sphere when I was a seven. I never thought outside the box. I was always very content with whatever was. I was just interested in my immediate satisfaction and joy more than questioning reality or what was true or anything like that. But the five became hungry to know. And so there's a different kind of seeking. So this is seeking external fulfillment and enthusiast. I became interested in seeking inner knowledge and wisdom. That became the hunger now. And so that was insatiable for 4 years. But that was a whole new stage of the journey. And so this turn, I love how simple it is, the Enneagram, because this was a big life journey, but I spent, say, 11, 12 years as a seven, like very fixated, very focused on being that person. And then overnight, I become a five. And I'm still a five, but I've expanded beyond that. But I spent 4 years really going into the five and developing my fiveness. And that means all of the gifts of a five as well. And so while when I was a seven, I read the amount of books I read was like equivalent to like 4 or 5 books in my life. But in the course of a year, I read like 30 books or whatever, 20 books. And then I kept reading and hungry for knowledge and seeking. And so I was developing all these qualities, including intellect, which I always thought was dumb or not smart, because that's what my high school experience kind of conditioned into me or taught me. And because I was a real seven, like in body as well. And I'll get into that, but like you have types associated with planets, actually. That's what the Shadow Keys offers. And so while I might have been a seven in mind, which I was also a seven in body, right? And that was a not self body, right? Where I was like ADD. And so I couldn't sit still. And so I was easily distracted, and I got like fidgety, that's a body of a seven. And so that turn to five was just a whole new experience. And I was discovering gifts and becoming a person that I couldn't even imagine. Like when I was a seven and I looked ahead, it looked nothing like a five or any of the other types, for maybe like a two or a nine. I could see that because they were like conscious parts of my personality. You know, I could see two and I could see some nine. But 5, 4, 6, 8, and 1 they were not present. Now I can see them all. And because I'm not busy being an enthusiast anymore, I'm busy being a rounded individual with many gifts and talents, a lot of them undiscovered and waiting to be discovered as potential within the unconscious or within our human design even, and our gene keys. So any questions on that? Beautiful. Cool. Well, I'll just say a little bit more. So the 2, 3, and 4 are about they're the feeling centers. They're concerned with self-image because it's about their image of who they are is how they get love. It's how they earn love. So the 2, well, I'll save that for later when we get to it. But the pain is shame and unworthiness, and they're here the strategies to earn love. And 5, 6, and 7, they've developed in response to fears. And so this is about security, or it's the survival mind or the egoic mind seeking its own security and survival. And So that's in response to fear. So head, heart, and gut. So that keeps it pretty simple. Yes, Carrie, love to hear from you.
So the triad, like we're Melanie and I are eights.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean that through our lifetime we start off as a one and then go to a nine and then become an eight, or what are the three?
Well, okay, I love this. Let's start there then. Let's start with eight since both of you are eight. And you can tell me about your experience. I'll get so let's see. Can you see this?
I can.
Okay, beautiful. So this is my interpretation of the eight. And so we got three archetypes here, the perpetrator. Could also be someone who's dominant, who needs to control and take charge, in shadow. But in light, they're a leader. And in like enlightened, they're a true light and a true source of like principles and protection for society or communities. They're a true light. Um, okay, and so their dominant emotion is anger, right? And if you think back to your childhood or your teens, were you an angry person? Was that your default emotion? Like when you were triggered, were you shouting at your parents, getting angry and aggressive, that kind of thing?
I would tend to say no. I I haven't had anger in my life, like once in my life I ever remember being angry.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I did as a child or something like that, but so that's saying that it's an eight, and then the three words, the perpetrator, the leader, and the light. Are
Yeah.
we all three of those all the time, or do we go through phases of life as we walk through them?
So you may have never been a perpetrator because from what I'm hearing, you're not an eight in conditioning. So as in you've not started here. You didn't start as an eight. How old are you? If you don't mind me asking, you can give like a decade. Like what age?
I Yeah, I'm in my 80th year.
Oh, you're in your 80th, right? So naturally, you've gone on your own evolutionary path. And so, what I'm saying with the shadow keys here is that the personality is not fixed and that you probably were never an eight. If you weren't like this in a childhood, then you weren't an eight, like in conditioning. But what you've probably found, and we need to look at your human design, is that you've got eights in your authentic design and your true self, or, it's part of who you are, being someone who's got authority, who's assertive, who's powerful and willful and decisive, you know? See more in this oh, that's not right. More in this side here, see the right side here. We've got
Yeah,
we've got the purity of an eight like in its light. So we got willpower. So the eight's all about being willful and willpower. And so
that I am.
that's a true spiritual gift, right? That's why it's the purity, right? Everybody needs willpower. It's the sword that really cuts through reality and creates reality. It's spiritual. And so this is what the eights are here to do. They're here to use their will and assert their will
Okay.
on the world. And so what you've done probably, what I'm assuming is that you've come into your gift of willpower, but you may have not started with your gifts. Were you a willful child, for example?
Oh yeah.
Oh, you were willful as a child. Okay, great. Well, that means that that authenticity was shining through at that age, right?
Okay, so I see what this is saying. The ones on the left are when we're in the non-self or the shadow part of our being.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Yes. And what's interesting for you would be like, okay, this is you shining as yourself here. So let's see what resonates. So willpower, you said that. Decisiveness, yes?
Yep.
A transcendent ability to choose what is most aligned to your needs or purpose. Assertiveness, yes?
Absolutely.
Yeah, self-confidence to effectively assert one's truth without fear. Proficiency and self-reliance, courage, protective.
Courage. Yeah, protective. I'm not sure about that.
Okay, that's just one aspect. We're also multifaceted, so you may not fully have eight. I'm sure you'll have other aspects. So power,
Yeah.
tenacity, and honor. So this is like a real heroic type, a real leader. And so it sounds like this is a large part of your personality, and you've done a lot of life. And so you've really come into the purity of who you are, right? You're shining there, right?
So over on the lower left where it talks about the HD profiles, and Melanie and I are both 6'2s and we're both 8s, but that's not listed on the profiles on the left. Why is that?
Okay. Well, do you want to see? Let's look at one then. So the six is actually associated with the one, right? And so what I'm saying is that
Okay, there I see it. Okay, interesting.
what I'm saying is that while five, let's say the type eight is authentic part of your nature and a foundation of who you are, it's not your dharma, let's say. It's not your dharma to be like this is to do with your dharma and your real purpose, like your soul's purpose, like what you programmed here to do. So your sixness is like you in your full light, actually. And so while you may have come into some six qualities, and we can look at that now, you may not fully embody the six yet. And so what I love about this Enneagram work is that it really adds a lot more to the understanding of the profiles, right? There's not complete like for like accuracy from RAS transmission, but let's face it, these are all patterns of nature. Like this fits, it fits. And so I've really, I guess, added to the transmission of understanding the profile nines by adding the lines here. And so, the six is known as the role model, to be a role model, to bring about justice and to enact change that has integrity. And so the one's all about integrity. And so that means telling the truth and standing for values. And so some of the numbers, let's say we can look at, let's have a look. And maybe you can tell me, and I'm jumping all over the place, but why the hell not? I'm still a seven at heart. There's less order to me than I'm not very like a one. A ones are known to be very ordered. I live intuitively, to be honest, and I just flow. So these are some of the nine gene keys or shadow keys that are associated with the one. And we can look at them here. And so some that are very typical are the 50, right? That's the gate
I,
of
I
value.
have the 50 in my
There you
chart.
go.
Yep.
So you can
Me too.
see that that's associated with the six and your destiny, right? Because that's all about values. And that's right in the spleen, if I'm correct. Yeah. That's in the spleen. So that's
Yeah.
really your instincts to stand for something. And that's
You
what
see, these shadow keys, I've been looking at them now. I don't know, when did they come out? A couple years ago?
a year and a half or so, yeah.
Yeah. And I've copied everything I've seen, and it just makes no sense to me. Just like, well, gene keys make sense to me, human design makes sense to me, astrology makes sense to me, but both the Enneagram and the shadow keys, I haven't been able to get a grasp on their
Okay.
systems, something.
That's good to hear. So I'm going to help you understand the Enneagram. I'm not going to help you understand the shadow keys entirely because it's still in the very early stages of development. And I've started with complexity. Actually, this is the same model or way that Ra, who brought about human design, did. He started like a computer chip. He started building the computer chip first before he got to, say, strategy and authority in your aura type, which is the gateway for everyone. I've not got to the gateway with the shadow keys. I'm still working on the complexity, but I still
So
want,
you're the originator or the design or the of the shadow keys?
yes.
Okay, cool. I'm really glad to be here then. Yeah, I've been curious about this and haven't been able to grasp it. So I'm really glad now that
Beautiful. And
you
look,
woke me up at 2 o'clock in the morning.
yeah, okay. I'm glad you're here as well because you'll be a good litmus test about whether I'm actually transmitting the knowledge of the Enneagram across in this new way. Because it should be understandable because the Enneagram part is actually quite simple. And I want to get that clear for everyone. So we'll check in with you every now and again to see if you're understanding. But right now we're jumping over the place a bit more. So I'm going
Thank
to
you.
stay here for a minute and just say a few things, right?
Okay.
So the 64 gates of gene keys and the shadow keys, right? Shadow keys is going to increase them, but we're not going to talk about that right now. Are patterns of nature and are seen everywhere in nature, outside of us, inside of us, in our mind, in our body, like in everything, right? And that's what the Gene Keys explains so beautifully, as well as Ra in his more mechanical. He talks about the body a lot, and right. And because he's focusing on the physical body and the conditions are not self, right? It's actually all mechanical. And that's what puts a lot of people off. Because to be honest, we are mechanical. When we're coming from not self or conditioning, we're programmed. We're kind of like machines, and that's what Gurdjieff, as well, the mystic who brought the Enneagram, he brought the Enneagram so that we could break out of our mechanical state, so we could stop being machines and live as essence, our spirit, our true nature, our self, live as that. And so the Enneagram was brought about to break us out of the mechanisms, actually. And so while human design is about like it's not really, it's about like leaning into the mechanisms but and enjoying just being the machine and creating this like witness or passenger consciousness and just really enjoying the ride. That's kind of what human design is teaching. It's like, hey, just stop trying to be someone, just be who you're designed to be, right? Be the human. And that's great, but also develop the awareness to not go into not self and to really surrender and enjoy the experience of being human and to play your role, right? That's beautiful. And I don't want to brush through that. I want to embrace that. But like Gene Keys, this is why it's a Gene Keys human design synthesis. I want to embrace spirit and our transcendent qualities as well with the shadow keys and the more mystical aspect of the Enneagram and about breaking out the personality, right? So that we can expand into more of who we are. And so that was one of Richard's, I guess, criticisms of human design is that it felt very mechanical and it doesn't embrace like enlightenment, very well. Like doesn't talk about that very much. He wanted to embrace more of our transcendent spiritual nature and the fact that there's everything's on a spectrum of consciousness. So they both talk about 64 gates. And the Enneagram has 9 types, or I call them 9 parts now. So there's 9. So we're looking at the 1, and then there's 2, there's 3, there's 4, there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I see the Enneagram as a meta structure. So if there's 64 patterns of nature, they can fit into 9 patterns as well. So we can see here that in type 1 or part 1, we've got gene key 5, gene key 12, 17, 18, 29, 50, 60, 62. And I've added an extra one, which I won't talk about right now, but there's a new transmission coming through from Robert Comer, and he's adding new gene keys or new gates in. And so I already intuited that there's more. And so I've began adding them in. So rather than 64, there's 72. And so I've added another one here. So let's check in. Carrie, do you get that the Enneagram is like, as I talk about the 9 types, they're like a meta structure for the 64 gates.
So you've grabbed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 gates or keys and put them in the category of type 1.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm starting to get it.
I've done that for each, and there's a real reason why I do this, right? It's not just to show another pattern, right? It's another pattern, but it's a broader pattern. And what I think the real value of the Enneagram is that, like, while it's hard to see, like, you can tell me, like, you guys have got 50, right? How
Yep, both of us.
to tune in to and notice your shadows of 50 and your the gifts of 50, right? Based on what you know about 50. How
Integrity is absolutely true. It's one of my lifelong core values, honesty and integrity.
Yeah,
Um,
beautiful.
yeah, absolutely. So as I'm trying to collect my scope of what you're doing here, when I'm talking to people about this stuff, I start them with the codon rings. You know, the codon rings have so many gates that are in this codon ring. So
Mhm.
you're kind of doing the same thing. You're taking a group of gates and they belong
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
to a
Yeah.
type.
Yeah. And the reason for this is not so much when we're embodying authenticity, like the shadow keys is really to help us decondition by focusing on the not self. So the reason I block it into one is so that we can address a bunch of shadows at once, right? There's a methodology that the Shadow Keys teaches that I won't be getting into today, but we might say a little bit. It's around taking aligned action. And then, so if we're in, like, say if we were conditioned and we grew up as a one and we're like a perfectionist, right? The ones are perfectionists and we're quite rigid and we're really scared of being judged and we're also judgmental of others. And we're kind of square. We stick to the rules and obligations. We can be pedantic, we like things a certain way, right? So that's basically 8 or 9 gene keys all at once, right? But they all fit under type one. And so if you know you're a type one and you're trying, that's like a box or a straitjacket for you now, and your life is being inhibited by being a type one. Your relationships are failing, maybe your work is failing, and most often with type ones, they're really stressed. They're kind of
I
joy. They're
I
joy.
love this.
Yeah, they're
You're really sucking me in here. The only thing now that I'm kind of confused about is Melanie and I both test as an 8, yet everything you're saying about the one
we'll get
is
we'll get to that.
okay.
We'll
Okay.
get to that. But yeah, just to finish what I'm saying, they're joyless. They're kind of yeah, they kind of feel stuck, right? They've not got much, they've kind of constricted their life force and they can be quite automatic or automated. And they're like living by someone else's rules in fear of judgment, right? And also judging others for not following the rules, right? And so if you come to the awareness that being this person, this type one, is limiting and hurting you and your relationships, you may decide like, okay, I need to grow. I need to change. Something needs to change. And so what the Enneagram does is say, hey, stop being a one, try being a four or try being a seven. These are the ones, let me get this up. So we see the reformer is attached to the individualist, right? The four and the seven, right? The four is an involutionary path and the seven is an evolutionary path, right? Okay, what keeps someone stuck as a shadow type one? The judge, right? They're fearing judgment themselves and they need to be perfect. Why? Because they've got a deep core wound of being defective, that they're somehow wrong inside, they're corrupt, they're defective, they're broken, and they can't let anyone see or judge that in them. And so that's why they need to be so rigid and perfect all the time, because that fear, that shame is so deep within them. And I know this because I've been battling this one recently or addressed it very recently. And yeah, I'll leave that there. And so, like, how do we heal that? Well, first of all, we have to contact the wound. And this is why the shadow keys is all about actually, rather than focusing on the light like gene keys, it's like focus on gift and city. I'm a healer, I'm a shaman. I'm interested in focusing on the dark and the pain and the trauma. Go to the root. And that's what the shadow keys really hopes to help people with is like, I'm going to give you clarity on what the root is of these gene keys and these gates. Like, let's get clarity on what is the real core wound that we can meet and address and heal. So for this one, it's feeling defective, basically, and broken, imperfect. And so one is to contact the wound. That would be a first step, right? We're going into action steps, right? And bring love
Okay.
and acceptance to the wound, right? And that's a healing, a cathartic experience that will immediately alchemize and transform you, right? But you still program to be a one. That's the thing. And that's why this work is not just about healing and awareness, it's about action, deconditioning, and reprogramming. And so you don't want to heal and then go back to being a one anymore. You want to expand. Your gateway out of being this small person. This is a smaller version of you. Really, you're all of the 9 types at different levels of awareness and consciousness. And so
Ah,
what the one needs to do, there's 2 ways, right? First of all, I just talked about the involutionary path. It's about going to type 4 and is actually embracing the pain and the chaos. And the 4 is like, it's like the victim. It's also the most content with feeling pain and emotions, and they love emotionality and like feelings and all that. And so the one is afraid of the chaos of emotions, and so they need to go down and withdraw into their little inner child, their innocence of the 4. And so that's an involutionary path. It's a painful path, and involutionary paths are always more challenging or painful. Not always, but like let's say they're more painful rather than challenging, because they're challenging in a different way. But it's about involving spirit into matter. It's about going into the pain in the body, the matter. That's where all trauma is stored. It's in the matter and body, right? And it's bringing the light of your awareness into that, involving spirit and matter. That's what involution is about. And so involution is really a healing journey. So, but when going into 4, you may discover things you like about 4. First of all, maybe you thought you were nothing like a 4, but actually in 4ness, you might find creativity. In your pain, you might find urges to write poetry or to write stories or to take pictures, because the 4s alchemize their pain through creativity and their melancholy. And so that's just one way to expand, right? But many people, like ones in shadow, might be rigid their whole lives until they have a nervous breakdown, right? Because they're trying to hold it all together and they're getting so rigid and tense and stressed and like constricted that they have to break down before they really embrace the chaos and the pain and the darkness that the 4 is more accustomed to. All right. Following the idea that this is an involutionary path, 1 to 4, yes?
so to heal, if the one is a wound, to heal, you follow the lines on the triad to, in this case, the 4 or the 7.
Yes, to heal and to evolve and to expand your consciousness into more of who you are, right? Because say if you grow up a conditioned self, right? As we all are, I was a 7 all my 20s and early 30s, right? So
Okay.
that's my small self, right? And there's nothing wrong with being a small self, a personality, right? I had a great life. I wasn't awake, I wasn't spiritual, but I enjoyed life. I was asleep, as they say in mysticism, right? But I was destined, I guess, well, maybe it was just psychedelics, but I awoke to more of who I am. And this, when you awake, you're kind of on a journey, a trajectory towards becoming your higher self. And many won't, who awake may not embody their higher self in their lifetime, right? Because that's a long journey. But that's the trajectory you start going on. First, it's soul, addressing the soul and more pain, more lifetimes of trauma and past life shit. But also gaining the gifts of the soul of a being who's had many lifetimes and incarnations on Earth, you know, and they're running concurrently or parallel, but they're also in the past, right? And you can retrieve the gifts of the soul. But you're also moving on to being what I've started calling the totality of who you are, which is like everything that you are. And being able to choose how you show up actually, because you're not rejecting or repressing any of these other parts, right? Because the 8 for me, just to talk about the 8 or and the 1, I'll stay a bit with the 1, was deeply repressed in me, right? I hated order and I hated being judged because my dad was like that, right? He was a judge, he was a 1, he had order and rules and regulations, and like I became a little 7, a little rebel. That was my defense strategy against his oneness, right? And so, and I didn't like my dad, to be honest, growing up, right? I loved him, but I didn't like him. And so I rejected his oneness. And in doing so, I reject my own oneness, and it gets pushed into the unconscious and it's repressed. But it doesn't mean I'm not a 1. It doesn't mean I don't have even those line 6 qualities, because I do. They're just repressed or hidden.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Because the pieces are kind of falling together. So Melanie and I are both 8s.
Yes.
We found out that we had the 1 through our profile number 6, that being a 6-2. That's how we got to the 1. But in this particular graph that you have here, the 8 doesn't seem to be connected to the 1 in any way. So
they're not, but
put that gap for me.
let's say they share certain qualities, right? They're both strong and assertive. They're both strong, and like the 8s can be quite they're principled, right? But they don't have the values and the integrity of the 1, right? And I've made them distinct for a reason, because they're different patterns, right? They're coming from different places. The 8s is kind of protecting against violation, and the 1s are they're connected to the 4. They're standing for what they deem valuable in life, what they find intensely meaningful, what's worth living for, like for real purpose, right? The 8s have purpose as well, but it's different. And so what I would say is like the difference is why you might not be showing up as a 1 is because you're expressing more 8 right now. It doesn't mean you don't have 1. But I'll also say that those tests are fallible, and I won't do a test. I'll have more evidence, right? First of all, I don't want anyone to identify as one type. That's not part of this process. Like, that's limiting ourselves again when we start, oh, I'm an 8. You're not an 8, you're actually the whole thing. And you might be expressing maybe just 3 or 4 or 5, but if that, but you're not just an 8, because I've already said about the values and the integrity, and you said, oh, I resonate with that. So that means you have 1 in you already. And this is the problem with the kind of commercial personality testing, is that they give people a box to live in and identify with. And the whole point of the Enneagram is to get out of boxes. So it's kind of having the opposite effect. It's like, oh, they can identify, they feel like part of a club, like that's me. I'm like, well, it's not you. You've just limited yourself now to an 8.
Okay, so Melanie's shaking her head too. I can't, I don't know how long I've known about Enneagrams, but I'm gonna say 10 or 15 years.
Okay.
And I've probably tested 4 times, and it always goes back to the 8. And I always go, that doesn't, I don't resonate with that. But when I looked at the category of the 6-2, then that took us to the 1 that showed the things that I identify with. So rather than starting at the 8 at the Enneagram, it looks like when it goes into the shadow keys, it's better to go with your what's it called? What's the 6-2 called? That's
a profile line.
Profile. Thank you. Couldn't find that word.
Yeah.
So looks like it's better to start with the profile, the human design profile, and then look at this.
Yeah. Basically, no one will start with a test with the shadow keys when the website is like launched in years to come, right? There's 2 ways to start. Either you start with your biggest life problem, which I love, right? Like, what's your biggest obstacle in life, right? And we can see where that shadow lies within each of these types.
Okay, so my biggest life thing is money. It's
Your
like
big
yeah, I've struggled with having money, keeping money. No matter how good of a job I get, I just spend my money and end up with no money. And I struggled with that my whole life. So that I would say that's my biggest shadow period.
Really? Well, that's
Yeah.
interesting. It doesn't even sound that eight. It's not an eight fear or thing, right? So that could be something else, right? But what you want is the medicine of the three, because the threes are materially successful. They've got material mastery as their highest quality. So what you need to do, and it's masculine, right? And so you're in a good place to move to a three in that because you've already got masculine qualities which are good for willful creation, right? They're good for creation.
But
But the
other than you telling me that right now, and God bless that you just did because I wrote it down, how would I know from taking my biggest pain, my biggest wound, or whatever it would be, how would I have known to do the 396 path?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's it. So really this work is a psychotechnology. So it requires your learning. So it's actually helpful to learn all the nine types, right? And that's something people learning the Enneagram don't normally do. They just learn about their own types. And maybe
Uh-huh.
they eventually over the years they may learn other types so they get to know their friends and their family and like they can label and box them in as well. Um, but the reason I learn all the nine types is so that I can identify all the patterns within myself. It gives me a powerful awareness. So I can see all the parts of me coming out. It's kind of like parts work, right? So of the 64, like if you got those nine dimensions, you can begin to notice them, right? Earlier today, I was noticing four qualities that I'd never really paying attention before. I was like, oh shit, that's four stuff. That's foreshadow that I'm dealing with right now. And I was like, well, I've not been an emotional being growing up, so I wouldn't know that unless I knew the patterns of a four, right? Because I learned it. And so my hope is that learning the nine types through one or two pages of knowledge each, and you can learn and integrate them as a psychotechnology that acts as a filter for your awareness so that you can actually, or pattern recognition. So you can actually start to see shadows with much greater clarity and depth within you. And like, oh, I can see them in me and I can see them in other people. And that helps you just know where you're coming from when what's not self and not self in other people.
Okay, so I'm on. So my concept of thinking the same way that you're thinking of working with the not self in our lives,
Mm-hmm.
I always thought that that would be to look at the shadow word that Richard Rudd has created the shadows because
Mm-hmm.
Rod didn't ever look at that. That
Mm-hmm.
one would look at the shadows of each of the gates that you have defined in your gene keys. So because you're looking at working with the not self, that's your intention here, working with your not self or your shadows, help me know from if I'm explaining it well enough from where my head is at. Yeah, I'm ready to actually look at all the places in my life where I'm falling into the shadow behavior versus the city or the divine behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so how can I use shadow keys to
Great.
look at my shadows?
Okay. Well, the next part is like there's two. I need. Can I get something? Maybe I'll just share it. And so there's two concepts that I want to begin teaching soon, and that's resonance is the first one. And so that's the power of your own intuition to know what is true for you, you know?
Hmm. Yep.
When I'm speaking or showing you information, there'll be things maybe gliding past you, and then there'll be things like popping, and you'll be feeling a resonance with those words, right? And that's because there's truth in them for you. They're triggering you in a way. and
Yes.
they're awakening something in you. And so what I want to teach is to trust that, to let that be your guide. And that's what this information is good for. That's why people are drawn to, hopefully they're drawn to like systems of knowledge like the gene keys or the shadow keys, right? The reason I put so much emphasis on getting specific words and even offering different words to Richard, right? I'm doing different words for every shadow and gifts, mostly aligned to the Enneagram, because for me personally, I feel these words resonate very well in the body and you can recognize them more because they're more part of our language, right? I'm not saying Richard's words don't resonate, they do, but I'm
Mhm.
adding a lot more to the thing. That's why I'm using my line one and doing a lot more information because I see the power of words and resonance. Because if you read something that pops to you and it's like, oh, that's me, that's like your clue. That's your little thing. Oh, like there's something here for me, and I'm gonna keep following it and trust it because you can trust it. That's your authority, right? Trusting what feels right, what feels true, what resonates, right? That's your guide. And so if you're dealing with a shadow of, well, what we'd have to do is get clear on what the shadow is with in relation to money. And then we could determine probably which of the nine types that it comes into, right? That would be a good place to start, right? Which of these nine buckets does that shadow fall under? We could have a good, I would be able to know that based on your information. And then we could go even deeper and then we could look at what key that relates to. And then we have a very specific journey on hand, right? And I'm going to show you something different now.
I like the using different words too, because I follow, I don't know, I'm going to say 10 people out of all the people that I've looked at in the gene keys and human design and in Europe and everything. So I've made a spreadsheet that says, okay, for gate 4, Richard uses these words, Ra uses these words, this person uses these words, Karen Curry Parker uses these words. And again,
Mm,
finding the words that resonate for me. So I absolutely get you finding your own words.
okay. So, for example, right? If we're in like we've got a type 2 Marie here. So you'll know all about this. I know all about it because I've got a deep type 2 in me, right? Light, it's in light right now, but there was a long period or all my life being in shadow of it, but also in light, right? We can also move between the two. But in my later life, especially in my relationships, I saw how my overgiving and self-neglect shadows were really inhibiting my relationships, right? They made me codependent, and that's another one. So the 19, the 27, these kind of ones that are orientated towards giving to the other, very other focused at the expense of the self, right? That's what the type 2 or part 2 is all about. And so when I say, if I just focus on one, let's say codependence, like the 19 here, right?
Oh, there's okay. I couldn't see the gates. Okay, so the gates are in the upper
Yeah.
right-hand corner. Okay.
First of all, I noticed that I had codependence, right? And I know that's type 2. So I start meta. I start, okay, that's type 2. Then let's look a little deeper. I was like, okay, oh, there's gates that's related to codependence. And it's not just the 19. And that's why I'm offering more work. That's why it also helps to know that codependence is related to, well, let's say most of the type 2, what do you call it, gene keys or shadow keys, right? So codependence is part 2. It's a massive theme. And while it's vital to understanding the 19, it's also important to understand codependence in, say, the 13, because it comes up there as well. Like
Huh?
it does, because the 13 is about, listening and
I
uh,
have the 13. Yep.
empathy. Yeah, cool. And so now that we've addressed the shadow, we know it's part 2. Now we're seeing, okay, there's actually other gates. And now, for example, this is looking specifically at moving to type 4 as a way of evolving, actually. This is evolution this time.
And so,
And
so I'm seeing that where you're going down to the green, the 13 is in a channel connected to the 33, which is the gate that's in the area that you're talking about right now.
yeah. And look, this is why I came to this page, just to show you this
Ah,
the correlation, right? So while we're looking at the specificity of the 13 to the 33 of this gate, which is like these are two gates of the 64, we're also looking like at a more zoomed out perspective of the 2 to the 4, the meta
oh,
structure. So the personality too is what we're in. We're in this giver archetype, this servant or this who are often needy for love and they've got wounds of unworthiness. And so that's what's creating the shadow here. When you know it's coming from the 2, then you can address it by moving to the 4 or moving to the 33.
okay. That's making sense to me. Melanie, is that making sense to you too?
Yeah. So
Cool.
another way we differ, as far as I know, like I've studied human design a lot, but I'm no expert of experts, right? So I've not looked into every single thing in human design. There's just far too much, right? But
Yeah.
as far as I know, at least publicly, what Ra talks about is that just be your definition and that you can't be the opposite side, right? That you only get wise and opposite side when you come into contact with other beings who've got that gate, right? That's kind of a common thing that's shared and talked about, but that's not what the Shadow Keys teaches. It's not what I believe or think is true. Is that where we're undefined is actually where we're learning, and Rad does say this is like that's kind of our school where that's the unknown, our unconscious, where we're learning. But what the Shadow Keys also says is that we're also experiencing the shadow of where we're undefined as well. And so this is why it's an incredible expansion to Gene Keys and human design, because it's actually saying, hey, look, don't just focus on your definition. There's probably really big shadows that you're not seeing, like underneath your definition. So literally in Gene Keys, and I won't show that yet, but so say your golden path, the harmonic gate on the opposite side of your golden path is your shadow keys. They're like your deep unconscious, and you will be affected by those harmonic gates. And that's like the depth that this work is going is like, hey, you should explore what's underneath your definition, what's unconscious, because it's affecting you. And we're affected because these are polar opposites. The 13 and 33, the 13 is about community and like listening and being there for others. And the 33 is the gate of privacy. It's about withdrawing and hiding from others, right? So they're actually polarized. And that's what the Enneagram shows is that the 4 and the 2 are polar opposites. That's why they're here. They're next to each other. This one's 4s are highly individualistic and 2s are highly kind of like uh, external or like pluralistic, let's say. They're more interested in other and the we rather than the I, which is the 4. And so these are polarized things. And one of the wisdom that came through when I was writing this transmission was that we're not just what we express. That's not who we are. We're also what we don't express. Because if I'm choosing to be a we person who thinks about other, I'm also choosing not to be an I person, someone who thinks about myself, right? But I'm choosing that unconsciously and I'm repressing that individualistic I version of me because I'm more interested in caring for others than caring about myself. And actually, I've shamed caring about myself. I call it selfish, right? And that was a big thing for me, like actually removing the shadow or the shame around selfishness. The 4s are selfish, but they need to be selfish. They're artists. They need to preserve their individual integrity and fill their own cup because they need to be highly individualistic. That's what they're here to be. They're here to be artists and innovators. And they can't do that if they're concerned about other people all the time. And so, yeah.
Okay. So looking at the 1333 that we're looking at right now,
Mhm.
which is a channel, and
Mhm.
you're saying one half of that channel is a individual type energy, and the other part of it is a collective type energy. Is that true of all channels? where gates are connected by a channel that one half of it will be like individual and the other half will be collective? Like that's the polarity?
No, not
Oh,
always
okay.
necessarily. They're polarized. I don't know. I've not actually looked at that in depth. I've not
Okay.
like when I was saying individual and collective, I was talking kind of broadly, not in human design terms. I was just talking about the nature of Enneagram type 2 and 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, just their natures. I've not looked at because there's far too much in this to look at, but there may be a pattern there, but probably not.
Okay.
Not consistently anyway. But the idea is that they're polar opposites. And so if we're busy being one side of the pole, we're also busy being not the other side, you know?
Yes.
We're busy being not that because we're highly identified and there's lots of needs and attachments in being this person. And so what this work is doing is help you freeing you up because we might be so rigidly a type 2. I know I was rigidly a type 2 for a while, but that was in deep denial to my heart is very 4, right? And for most of my life, I was very conformist, go with the flow, easygoing, like doing what everyone else did. I wasn't individualistic at all. But if you look at the work I'm doing now, Shadow Keys is all about being highly individual. But my individualism was repressed because I was too busy caring about other people, which is type 2, and too busy going with the flow, which is type 9, right?
Wow.
I was denying really authentic and integral parts of my nature from coming through. So the only reason I'm able to live on purpose now is because I've freed up enough of my conditioning to allow that purpose to come through.
So interesting. So glad I woke up and got to be with you this morning.
I'm so glad too. All right. So we are going in depth here, but I hope you get this, right? So the idea is that we have the meta level, like 2 is connected to 4, and they're polar opposites, and they're one of 9 types or 2 of 9 types. But then there's the 33 to the 13, and they're like also polar opposites, but on a more microcosmic level. And so we can work, we want to get very specific, like say if we're at a 13 and we're being emotionally drained by our relationships because we keep listening and not telling our friends to shut up and give us space or that kind of thing, or we keep saying yes to people when we really mean no, like a 13, right?
Wow.
We can get very specific with that emotion, being emotionally drained, and moving to by learning about the 33 and the need to withdraw, politely declining offers and saying, no, I need my own time. I need some introspection. I need some time to reflect, as the 33 is all about, right? We can do that very specifically and we can create action steps to help us condition this new healthy behavior in, right? This is what this work is for, is so you can really identify actions or new behaviors that can create new neural pathways that help you become more of who you are, right?
Yes.
Yes. And so you can do it in this micro level, but you can also do broad sweeps, right? So we're looking at if we're fully identified as a type 2, as I was once with, right? Our core wounds, we're always feeling we're unworthy of love, and we're always giving to others because, that's the only way we feel worth. We need to be needed. We need to be needed. And we need to be liked. And we are always giving and we love giving and it's great, but we're often doing it at the expense of our own needs. We're self-neglecting. When things get awkward or like confrontational, we'll go into fawning, or people pleasing, and we're codependent in all our relationships, right? So rather than just working on one of 64 gene keys, let's work on 8 or 9 gene keys at once, because we're just going to address part 2 as a whole, and we're going to address it by, for a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 2 months or 3 months or longer. We're going to try be a 4. Perhaps we feel intuitively in our spirit, and it's reflected in our gene keys, our human design charts, that there is a creative essence to us. There's a desire to be authentic and self-expression and prioritize creativity, emotional honesty, emotional depth, innocence and grace. These really authentic qualities and artistry of the four, right? Perhaps we showed those qualities when we were like a child, and we want to return to that innocence and that purity of who we are. But we're so busy being this type 2 person that we've forgotten our creativity and our innocence and our authenticity. We've forgotten who we are. And so we're going to really seriously create a transformational journey for ourselves to come back to this essence.
Wow.
So that's how we can address, like, create real actionable. Uh,
Okay, stay on that screen for a second. And Maria's saying, absolutely, she's completely in line with what you're saying, and she's a 2. Now scroll up just a little bit more.
yeah.
Okay, so the 3 gates that you've identified here in the dysfunctional part from the 8, the 13, and the 19.
Mhm.
Down in the functional part 4 behaviors, you've got 133 and 33. Is that a typo or?
No, so there's also, and this is a nuance, right? So there's the harmonic gates, which is the polarity, 13 to 33, but there's
Yep.
also the gender opposite here. So there's 19 and 33 are gender opposites. That's programming partners in Gene Keys
Oh,
language.
programming partners. Okay, got it.
So I focus mostly on harmonic gates because it's more powerful for me.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
working with polarity. So that's working with opposites to liberate our mind from being a small identity or fixated on being this one person, right? Because
Yep.
I need to be codependent because I'm unworthy, or I need to be giving because my worth is not inherent, right? Focusing on these things, by being the opposite, it frees us. Like, it's like, actually I can be selfish because there's no shame in selfishness. It actually allows me to put all my energy back into me and focus on creating art and doing what I love. And that's a beautiful contribution. That actually is a service, but in a different way, right? Because the service is what I contribute through my art now. It's my creativity and it's my authenticity. It's who I am when I'm radiating as my artist self. Say if I was an artist at heart, right? I like that is service, but it's not like giving and being a servant, right? So what the two is really focused on one kind of service. It's all about kindness and giving, and not just, whereas the 4 is about, actually it's a service just to be yourself and radiate your light. You know,
These slides that you're showing us, are they in a book or have you written a book
they will
yet?
be. I'm gonna build little ebooks and sell them for like a very small amount of money, I think, soon. But they're going to be like in depth. But I do these as posts, so it's all on Instagram. I know it's pretty small and not the most convenient to get access to, but I also offer it all for free on Instagram, and eventually we'll do it on the website too. But yeah,
But
looking
they're
for
not on Facebook.
they're on Facebook if you scroll down. I've not
Okay.
released this type 2 one yet, so I'm a projector, so I actually go really slow and it's annoying because there's just so much of this transmission. And I wish I was a generator, a manifesting generator, right? So I could I definitely got some manifester in me, but I would love the energy just to like really bust this out for y'all, but it's going to take a long time. But the reason it's also going to have a lot of depth, and that's what the projectors offer, right? I'm going to have a lot of depth and insight
Yep.
that maybe other
Yep.
generators might not be able to have. But that's not strictly true. Obviously, when you transcend the limitations of even your aura type, you can transcend all the limitations of everything in your design. And so, anyway,
Yes. Yes, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm
yeah.
excited.
Okay, beautiful. So, what was I saying that? Yeah, I'm going to offer ebooks. So look out for them. They're going to be a small contribution, which is going to help fund this project because it's going to take a long time. And I guess it's my full-time work right now. It's helping people with work one-on-one, but also just teaching this now.
Wow.
Um, all right, beautiful. So this is addressing something we talked about earlier, right? It's my little personal journey. So I'm writing an ebook, Just about this is going to be all about the methodology and a little bit about the story. And I don't know, Melanie might have seen this because she's watched one of the videos, right? But I think I should just share it here, which helps explain things for you, Carrie, I think. So the idea is that, the evolution, this shows evolution and growth, the Enneagram. And, 6 and 9 are like the largest amount of the population, right? Because people are stuck in their personality. They're stuck being nines, which are incredibly passive and agreeable, and they have dead will. Essentially, they've got zero willpower. They're like the opposite of an 8, actually. So nines are like the most popular one, and it's because they've got no will to change. They're stuck being nines because they're scared of conflict and therefore scared of challenges and growth. And they're also avoidant by nature. And so that's why everyone, and while people can become really healthy nines, the fact is that they're stuck in personality. But, the 9 always has the option to transcend their personality because they're, I guess, they're more open and receptive to spirit. That's the idea. They've got a very receptive or feminine nature. That's what makes them be able to go with the flow. They got associated gene key or shadow keys 2 is a good one for receptivity, orientation. So 9 and 6 are the most popular ones because they're the most fixated on being this person. So the 9's fixated on avoidance of conflict, which keeps them avoiding the challenges that are there to make them heal and grow. And the 6, which was me when I was younger, is focused on the status quo generally. You do get rebellious 6-7s, which kind of like rebel, but the 6s are generally conformists. They're very interested in security, so they'll be quite traditionalist often. They'll do things they'll stay in a 9 to 5. They like health benefits. They like family and security. They're the typical person in the Western world, the 6. And so no wonder they're the most popular, right? And it's very hard to get out of it being a 6 because it means risking your security. And in my talk about purposelessness to purpose, talking about the 28, which is a good example, in light, they're the risk taker. Actually, they're more like a 7. They're like a 7, but in shadow, they're risk averse, the 28. And so they'll stay stuck. And I was stuck in a relationship for 10 years of my life, from 17 to 27. And so I was a 6. I had the full-time job. I was just doing what was expected of me. I was just living the conformist life, just following the program, what your parents tell you, what society tells you. That's what the 6 is. There's not individualism in there, really, not much. And it was around my Saturn return when I decided to look inward at my emotions that were coming up and start to get out of my head and fear and insecurity. I came into, all right, I want to do something for me. And that was go on an adventure, go on a life trip, traveling. And so that's why I did at 27, right? I was still, and so that was coming into 7, but I was already living in a shadow of a type 7. I was pretty much an alcoholic, drinking all the time, partying a lot. When I was in my 20s, I was enjoying myself. I was having a good life. And when I say alcoholic, I wasn't in a bad way. I just enjoyed alcohol and I drank it habitually as for fun. And so I moved to the 7 when I was 21 to 30. But I guess I moved more into the light at 7 when I really left the nest of the 6. Okay. And then I told you about the spiritual awakening experience I had when I was like 30, 31. And then that moved me into a 5, right? And suddenly I'm a line 1, and line 1s are associated with 5. Okay. The introspection, the reclusion, the kind of detail oriented, the knowledge seeking. And so only when I had my spiritual awakening, thankfully, for me, but I may have done it anywhere. With knowledge, you can always grow and move. and awakened slowly. I had a thunderbolt kind of awakening. I guess that's kind of part of my mystical life path, right? I had a thunderbolt awakening and I awoke and I became a 5, which meant I started embodying my line 1 almost immediately, right? But I was so far away from a line 5, which I've associated with the type 8 here, so far, and still coming into it. I've not fully embodied the 8, the leader yet, but I can feel that that's an authentic path for me. That's moving more and more. I've in my retreat recently that it was all about willpower. And as a type 9, I was so will averse, so scared of willpower, so scared of having authority, so scared of authority. So there was a lot of, and scared of, being vulnerable, like an 8 and violation. So there was a lot keeping me from 8. And so I broke down those barriers now and I'm moving authentically into an 8. And so there's a path unfolding here that you can see. And so what the Shadow Keys is offering you is an understanding of where you're going based on where you are right now. It's offering you direction so that you can get more clarity about who you are and where you're going and where you're at on your spiritual journey. Are you embodying your lines yet? Are you embodying your 6-2 or your 6-3? Or in my case, the 5-1, right? This can help you to show where your conditioning is holding you back from embodying your light, your dharma, your truth. So, does that make sense, Carrie?
What's making sense is the changing the different types that you are, even though I tested as an 8 at any phase of my life as I've gone through things, I could be more, and I don't know if behaving is the right word, like a 1 or a 2 or a blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. Exactly. And there'll be different aspects of you progressing and evolving concurrently, right? So,
Interesting.
so if you think about it, the 8 is your will, it's your assertiveness, it's your you can think of it as connected to your body, your gut instincts, right? Right? That's one domain. But you also have your heart, like 2, 3, and 4, right? Where are you located in there? Maybe because I was a 2, for example. So let's say, and I will introduce this, the idea of tri-type. Let's go back to this one, right?
Yeah.
So I knew very early on that this idea of being one type was bullshit, basically, and not helpful. That was limiting. I just intuitively knew that being one type was wrong and unhelpful, right? I've not seen anyone, no one's been able to convince me that we have just one type. And I don't see the use of that at all. But there is a theory called tri-type theory, which has more legs for me, that we have one from each center. I don't think it's true either, but let's say it's much more helpful to think of yourself as a tri-type, to have 3 types that you're working with at the same type, right? So for me, I identify strongly with the 2, that giving, helpful, externally focused nature, right? The shadow of like neediness and self-neglect. The 9, very conflict avoidant in the gut, averse to anger. I was completely repressed in anger, didn't get angry until I was 31, right? So I had a 9 nature, avoidant of conflict, path of least resistant kind of guy, right? Easygoing, chill, fun, optimistic. And I had a 7, which was the pleasure seeker, joyful, enthusiastic, versatile, likes spontaneous, doing lots of different things, kind of ADD, and doing many things. But also impulsive, can be overindulgent and all that stuff, right?
Okay, that's the next thing I'm going to look at then when I dig into this next is.
Yes. My invitation is to read the profiles of each of the 9 types.
Wow.
Because they'll resonate and it won't take long. You could do it in an hour. You just need to read like a page on each, and I can link you to either my work or another website afterwards, probably my work, because I've written on each type and on my Instagram page. And so you can just read each type, and it's like a short passage, like a write, small writing, of
Yep.
course, but you'll read it and you'll resonate. And then when you open to the idea that you have all the types, and you may start to see some you won't see because it's still unconscious, right? And you're not at that layer of conditioning, because we're conditioning is layered, right? It's like an unfurling pattern, or yeah, well, like an uncoiling thing. So we're only aware of so much at once, right? But I wouldn't be surprised if you're aware of like two or three of these, if not four, um, different ones. So let's say you're 8 in the gut, but there'll be two, three, or four here, probably. You also have some one, of course. And that shows you're expanding, right? You're expanding in
Okay.
this,
Why
this
did you just say that? Why did you just say that the 8 and the 1, of course?
because you've already told me about the one that you've already resonated with that. So I'm trusting you and what you told me to be true about being someone of integrity, of
Okay.
having values, and also being aligned six, right? So you're
Yep.
already told me that's all you need to know. This is what I teach, is like, trust yourself, trust your own intuition and what resonates. You know that about yourself. You don't need a test to show you it. The test is only going to confuse you because you're going to trust that test more than you trust yourself.
Wonderful.
Okay, beautiful. So we got these, and then there's your head type, right? This would be helpful to know, like, have you moved your 8 into a 5 yet? Have you become wise in that, observe, like, rather than like running in and dominating life, is like sitting back and observing the right course of action, you know? Because maybe that could be related to your money troubles. You don't know, because the eights are always in the moment. They're always acting instinctually. They're acting, taking action, initiating. Whereas the fives are the opposite. They're avoiding action. They're staying in their heads, and the planning and the imagination and the invention. They're like stuck in the basement working on something. Like I've been for years on screenwriting before this, and that's like just working on things, but not actually bringing it into the world. And so, they're avoiding confrontation with life. But they become very astute and very wise, and very, I guess, intellectual and clever, that kind of thing. So they overplan in shadow, like they overplan and overprepare. Um, but in light, they know exactly what to do, and it's all organized well. So, does that resonate with you, the investigator?
When I learn something like human design, biorhythms is the example that I use in everything I teach. I first learned about biorhythms in the 1970s, and I understood it and I got it. And so before I told anybody else about it or started teaching about it, I made year-long graphs for me and my two best friends. So I made 3 year-long graphs by hand because computers weren't out yet. And do you know anything about biorhythms?
No.
Okay. Um, so just pretend like you do.
Okay.
So I made this year-long graph that had lines that were going up above a center line, down below a center line, up above a center line, and explained it to them and said, don't look at this in advance, but every time you feel this, go put an X on the mark that's on your graph that shows on that day you had an emotional reaction or a physical reaction or an intelligent reaction to something. And over that year, two of us were within 2 days of what the biorhythm said they would be for a whole year. And one of us was 4 days off every month, every time she had one of that. And that's when I started teaching it after I had a year's worth of saying, okay, I learned about this, but I'm not going to train it or tell anybody else about it till I prove that it's true. I'm doing the same thing with Gene Keys and human design. I pull it into what I do as I find the truth of it.
Okay, that's
So
very five. That's essentially the 5 dynamic right there.
I don't learn something right away and share it. I've got to prove that whatever I've learned is true.
Okay, and that's in me too. But I'll be interested to know if you come across the dynamic that I have, right? If I had to get all this right, this work, the shadow keys, which is just an exploration, that's still at this point, it's still an exploration. There'd be no way to do it. Like it'd be too, I'd get so demoralized because
Yeah.
I've still not cracked the code, right? Like I've not found, let's say, divine symmetry or perfection in it. I just know there's truth in there. And the perfectionist would shame and resent me and judge me so much that I would probably wouldn't be able to continue because a year and a half in now, and there's been lots of mistakes and there's lots of me going back on what I originally said, right? And I'm refining it. And so that is the light of the perfectionist rather than perfectionism, trusting the refinement process. And so I gave myself immense freedom to be able just to post on Instagram every week without caring. I did it for me, not to teach at that stage. I just did it because I knew that was a way to, let's say, compensate for the shadow. That was really, I couldn't address it. It was too deep at that stage. And I've only just started to address this deep, deep fear of judgment and, this feeling wrong.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Wow.
But, the cool thing is that when you know these patterns, you get strategies. The whole thing is to be very strategic about your own healing and evolution. Like that's the offering. It's like you can be very
Yep.
specific about what you do. It's not like, RAS is kind of generic by default, that's this strategy and authority. Do that and you decondition in 7 years. But if you do this, you're learning exactly how your not self is working. You're becoming highly self-aware and you're becoming highly intentional about your own healing and evolutionary journey, right? You're choosing it
Yep.
all, you're creating it all. And so you're going to shave years off that timeline. Yeah.
I
Cool.
want to clap my hands and applaud you for this.
Oh, that's so kind. That's so kind. Right, let's see where we're at. Let's have a little review. I didn't go through, I've kind of done it very intuitively and sporadically, jumping around, addressing questions, but hopefully there's a coherent story forming. Um, what I was going to go through was each type, and we can do that if we want. Um, but I just want to check in with everyone. How's everyone sitting? Is there anything that they would really like addressed on understanding the Enneagram as a tool for understanding the personality and the not self, but also our gifts, right? Because if you see, let's go back to the 8, while we've got all the shadows, and I'm going to stay with the 8 and we're going to go into it a bit more. We've also got all the gifts here, right? And interestingly, here's food for thought, right? I don't know how true this is, but it's certainly somewhat true. Could be very true. So there was a time I was like all my light was identified with being a type 2 personality. All the things I loved about myself was about being kind, being selfless, giving to others, and caring and all that stuff, right? I modeled after my mum. She was a caretaker, a nurse, right? She was like my superwoman, I guess, right? I rejected
Yeah.
the father, he was more like type 8, type 1. So, and focused on my mum, modeling after her. And so this was my whole identity about what I loved about myself, what I accepted in myself. But when I began this journey, the hardest thing for me was it was the journey, the evolutionary journey was telling me to give up everything I loved about myself. The two,
Whoa.
the two, like the inauthentic parts, right? Which actually meant everything. I honestly did. It meant like, and it was hard or even impossible to stop being kind, right? I still had to do it and enjoyed doing it. But really, I had to decondition from the shadow, and they were enmeshed. The shadow and the light were totally enmeshed. And so I could only decondition by really focusing on, I went to 4 primarily, going into my emotional body, feeling emotions and being self-centered, usually mostly during COVID, really focusing on healing and being emotionally driven, artistic and creative, that kind of thing. And so I didn't have to worry. I didn't say I'm not going to be kind. I just focused on being a 4. Um, but I felt loss. I felt a lot of loss in giving up kindness, giving up giving, and focusing on other people. It was very confronting for my ego because that's what it loved about itself. That's what made it, gave it a sense of identity, being this kind person. I'm like, well, what if being kind is not authentic to me? What if it's not my true nature at all? It is, as it turns out. I have the 19 in my unconscious Mercury, which is a very important key for the shadow keys. So it's an authentic part. But there was a time where I had to give up being the 2, so that I could grow. And it was hard and even unpleasant at times. Um, but in doing so, I was able to also address, the deep unworthiness I felt, being unlovable or unwanted, that kind of thing. And certainly a lot of the people pleasing. Yeah. But that was more later. I addressed the people pleasing when I started moving towards, because 2 is associated with the 8 as well. So really being assertive, not being afraid to assert authority, speaking the truth, that kind of thing. Yes. So the idea is that, when we are the small self or the not self, and we're focused, like the most of the population are being a 6, there's potential that their true light authenticity is nothing like a 6. Like, and their 6ness is actually getting in the way of who they really are, is getting in the way of their human design or their gene keys. And same with the 9, like the 9, some people are destined to be 9s, right? I've got large 9 in me. I've got them in my chart, but there was also a part of me that could have been a 9 in shadow for a lot of the life, just conflict avoidant, right? Right? And avoiding their true nature, avoiding their challenges, taking a life of ease and comfort. Yeah. So let's look at the 8 again. So how much of this resonates with you guys? Like, are you suffering from any of this not self, the pain, actually the wounding, right? Because the strategies of the not self are born from the wounds. So there's 9, but there's more, but there's 9 core wounds, let's say. And the 8 core wound is that of powerlessness, right? At some point, their innate power was violated because their boundaries were violated and they felt powerless. And so up came the defensiveness of the 8, protection, hard armor, anger, which is anger is a protection against violation of boundaries, aggression, dominance and control are strategies so that one is not violated. They're trying to control territory or dominate others so that they're the one. It's all about power with the 8. And so the question is, and it's the invitation with the shadow keys, is to like not focus on the light. Are you willing to look in? How does this feeling of powerlessness resonate in your body? Do you feel that pain? Is that something you suffer with?
Yeah, there's something here because I think I'm like putting the dots together. I remember the time I felt powerless. Like, as a 6'2", I was always like the good girl, the good student, first in class, whatever. And of course, it triggered people from the back of the class. And so like they ganged up on me, and so I was like harassed when I was 12. And that's the first time I felt powerless, because suddenly it became like dangerous to be the smart one. So my grades fell down, etc. And that's probably when I started to use my brain to control the way how people perceive me. I don't resonate like much with the anger part because I always say I don't need to get angry because I am smart enough to control you in smarter ways. Like I don't need to yell at you because if I say the right thing, I'm gonna hurt you more than just yelling.
Mm. So,
So that's what coming up.
do you mind if I reflect on that about where that shows up in the Enneagram?
Um,
Can I share?
I don't know, yeah, much about the Enneagram, so
Do you mind? Can I share what I see in
sure.
the story? That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Um, is that's the one defenses, right? So if the eight's about controlling others and controlling the environment, the one's about self-control. It's like I'm controlling myself and I don't get angry. Yeah, I'll get angry inside, but I'm not going to express that anger. That's wrong. It's wrong to get angry and show that, but I'm going to be self-controlled and I'm going to be resentful maybe, and I'm going to be judgmental and I'm going to, yeah, control, like self-control rather. And like how I'm perceived, right? You're controlling yourself so that you're projecting an image that's going to be non-judged or accepted, you know?
Yeah, when you were sharing about the one, I have like 5, 50, 62, and I really resonated from back from those days with my 62. It's my conscious earth, so it's in my incarnation cross. And I always say, I joke with my clients right now that the my 62 is the reason why I was bullied in school because I was like, being the smartass in class,
Mhm.
and it came out as pedantic
Uh,
for others because oh, she knows everything, blah blah blah. So it was like not perceived well, and I learned that at that age that uh, some people don't like when you you are the smart one. So yeah,
mm,
that's really interesting. Yeah.
mm. And
And I have like get 18 to 58 channel. So the judgment part resonates a lot too from
oh,
the one.
beautiful. So there's a lot of one in your chart, and there's one in your profile, right, with the six. So that's here, the shadows you're here to overcome, and the light you're here to embody, which is great, right? That's quite clear. The interesting thing is the eight. So why is eight showing up authentically for you? I would be interested to see your chart and to see like what gates are aligned to eight and stuff like that. Maybe you can share it, like, and we can start looking at charts now because I think that'd be an interesting way in.
Yeah. Do you want me to share my chart?
Yeah, if you can, like you can share on Zoom, you have permission.
Yes, that's very cool.
Yeah, and we can get yours up, Carrie, or Marie if she gets our camera, but I'm sure these examples will be good. Beautiful. All right.
Sorry, it's in French.
That's okay. We just need to look at the gates right now. Okay. Because so we know she's registering as a type 8, and so we have to look at where's that coming from in the chart, right? You know? This is going to be easy eventually, by the way. I've just realized that this is a very detailed, quite advanced presentation. But I have a vision about how this is going to be super accessible for people one day. But at least I'm glad you're with me still, all right? So let's look at, I'd say the most eight one you've got is 21 here right now.
In
So
my moon. That's
oh,
my conscious. Yeah.
okay, so that's
So
very
that's a big
powerful.
one.
So the moon is like one of the most powerful ones, I think in general, but in the Shadow Keys transmission. I'm not going to get into the planets, but I have information about what planets are most important to the Shadow Keys transmission. And the moon is one of them, and the unconscious moon for that matter, right? Moon attraction sphere, unconscious moon, and the conscious moon. So you're 21, right? Because that's what's driving you, right? There is a
Yeah.
drive, and it's in the will. So there's extra drive to be bold, to be assertive, to control in shadow, or let's say in a like command, right? There's an authority and command here.
Yeah.
Eight, that's very powerful. And I would hazard a guess, if you don't mind me, I guess, profiling you a little bit. The
Yeah,
reason why
sure.
this is important for you right now is so that to overcome your fears of judgment of others, right? You have to be very strong in your identity. You have to be quite hard because the eights are, they don't give a fuck about what people think. They're
Mm-hmm.
very crystallized in their identity. In shadow, they're hardened and there's no malleability or no permeability. They can't be vulnerable or they can't change really. And that's okay. They're a strong identity and they're meant to be strong in their identity. And they're meant to be kind of fearless in their identity so that they can hold strong against adversity and opposition. So whatever life is throwing them, people, situations, their identity doesn't collapse under that pressure. That's what
Okay.
the eights have, a very strong ego identity. And you, the will center that is the ego, right? That's the ego. So you got, when leaning into your 21, and I guess here is an opportunity to think about whether that's an area that you can expand into more, because it's having a strong identity and a strong ego, robust, commanding, authoritative presence that's not afraid of judgment is going to support you really coming into your dharma and your six, right? That could be like a foundation, right? Think of the six in their light or the type one in their light. They're kind of like activists. They're calling in change for the future. They're reformers. They're reforming. They're saying this is not good enough. The way things are, it's not right. And actually, this is where we're going. This is a brighter future. And the sixes, the type ones are here to bring in that brighter future through their farsightedness, through the wisdom, through their, I guess, their attunement to what matters, right? Because they've got a healthy type one, or part one is connected to their part four, their what really matters in life, what's worth preserving, right? And so if they like to really be a change maker, which the ones are, that is great adversity. You're gonna life is doesn't want, like, society doesn't want to change. Life is change, right? But society doesn't want to change. It wants to stay the same. And the ones are here to bring in the revolutions and the reformations. But you can't be weak if you're going to do that. And so the eight is like and if you think about it, six is where your light is. What's below six? It's five, and five is associated with the eight. And it is said, and I can't remember where I read it, someone's transmission was that there is a natural progression: one, two, three, four, five, six. And six includes all of the previous numbers. It's not just standing alone. It
Yeah.
needs to be a six in your highest light. You need to have integrated one, two, three, four, five as well. And so perhaps what you're doing where you are in your life is integrating that line five, that power, that type eight, part eight essence of will, of authority, of strong ego identity.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And the fact that my G center is like undefined, from a really young age, I knew I could like change like my personality, like create a new identity for myself. So that was always helpful for me.
Beautiful. But yeah, the ego here, is that your authority as well? No, no, you've got solar.
No.
But the ego here is a strong identity, and it's something that you can lean on and rely on, especially it's defined. You got the 21 and the 26, right? You're here to have an identity that is strong in that domain, right? Um, yeah, beautiful. Um, Anything else? I think maybe we'll look at Carrie and bring up something on her nature as another example. I think that was helpful.
Thank you.
No worries. Do you have your chart, Carrie? Okay. So, what shall we look at, Carrie? Will we look at address this money issue?
How I can have the 2644 defined and half of the 4521 defined and not have money taken care of is the biggest question in my life.
Mm, mm, mm. Well, mm, yeah, it sounds like a material issue. So the 26 is a unconscious here, and that's to do with type 3 or part 3. Shall we have a look at that? So
Okay.
let's look at the money issue. I think that's a good one to look at. Okay. So let's look at this and pay attention to what's resonating here. Carrie, like listen to your body, drop in, and just listen. So we got a shining example here is Tony Robbins, right? Ultimate material manifester, Tony Robbins. So in the purity, I really like the word ascensionist. This is like the highest form of the part 3, which I created. Like I envisioned the ascensionist. I really felt this vision of like using material reality as for spiritual evolution. So not get like in the shadow, material reality is superficial and it's caught in the matrix, but an enlightened part 3 or type 3 identity is actually using material reality to evolve and to ascend as a soul and to like give back to the world, right? They're doing their part by being materially successful, by being a shining example, by being a role model. So in purity, there's the word I use is glory, a shining example and a role model for achievement within the physical. That's glory. And the potential here is radiance. And this is a key for the part 3, right? Whereas in the shadow of the part 3, they get caught up being superficial, inauthentic, artificial, anything to do vain. They create a self-image in order to be successful, to be liked. It's all about a self-image. It's not about being authentic. It's about receiving glory, yes, but doing it so artificially, inauthentically. But in true glory is comes from your radiance within, an authenticity that radiates through one's actions into the world, right? It's about being yourself. And if you're part 3, and maybe like I don't know who is here, but it's authentic for you to be successful if you're a line 3. Like that's your sign of success. Part 3, sorry. And I know all these numbers, parts, and lines is confusing, and there's a part of me that wants to amalgamate them, but I've not done that yet because this transmission's still coming through, and I don't want to get ahead. Right now, Enneagram parts and types are separate from the lines. But the premise here is that
But
they're yeah.
what gate do you associate with the tree energy? The gates for this one?
What gates? These gates. So we got 14, we got 10, we got 20, 26, 31, 32 is a maybe. I think in higher it is, but not really. 32 is more of a 6, aligns part 6. 54 is massive for it. 31 is massive. 59, dishonesty, vulnerability. Um, and 71 is one of the new ones. But yes, 54, 31, 26 is really big for it. 14 is massive for it as well. So these are big part 3. And I have hardly any part 3 in my chart. This is why this is my last bastion for me to like overcome my not self, right? Because that's a bit deep for this. But basically, because I don't have this in my chart, uh part 3, any of the gates for part 3, that means I'm going to struggle embodying success and being materially successful. And it's true. This is like not something that comes easy for me or natural or something I ever wanted even. Yet it's also part of my destiny. So that is it is in there. And yeah, I'll leave it at that for now. Sorry, I must be getting so when I talk a lot, I get overstimulated and it's my ADD coming out, and so I'll start messing up my words. So that's maybe we can just do that. I can take a breath. So I'm going to stay with you for another little minute uh, and finish this. But yeah, I've probably gone on longer than I had capacity for because I love sharing with you guys. And that's probably why I'm muddling up my words. I think it is.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay, beautiful. Right. So we have glory, we have radiance, we have competence. This is what they're all about, being competent, effective in the world and gaining material success. They're really effective. They know what to do to be effective and successful. They're pragmatic and they're efficient. It comes easy for them, right? And so a good check in whether you're material successfully or not, Carrie, is that do you feel competent? Are you effective at what you're doing? Because the proficiency here is ambition. They know how to aim for the top. A lot of part type threes are like CEOs. They don't like do small fry. They're like, I'm gonna be the best. Like I'm going to the very top of the tower here. And they don't stop until they're there. That's the ambition of the three. There's got that the 54 of drive. This is the gate of drive. That's really where all the part three comes from, the 54. It's like there's an incredible drive to be successful. It's ambition and they aim high, the highest, because they have to be the best. That's their shadow. They fear failure. They feel losing, and they're highly competitive, you know. And so it's like, can you bring in some of this in order to be successful? Like this competitive edge, this great ambition. Is there something you care enough about, right? And there should be something you care enough about if you're a line six, right? There's something you're here to bring in, like some wisdom, right? But can you also tie it into like ambition?
So
And
my part of my intentions is to get as many classes and books and everything on Teachable available for sale in an automatic way over the next year. And then my grand thing is to be a keynote speaker, which
mm,
would be taking advantage of my two greatest skills, and that is to be inspiring, be on stage, and sing. I love, 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 love creating notes. So my intention is to be a keynote speaker that can do $30,000 for each appearance, taking my ability to inspire people how to go from their shadow parts and their pain parts and into rewriting their stories and regaining their happiness and their joy. Does that make sense?
that makes perfect sense. And that's very part three, right? That vision of you being on stage, right? Sounds like you're involving your line two, that creative essence, that expression, that naturalness, which is associated with the Enneagram 4, the artist. And you're bringing it to the stage for like glory, shining your radiance and light on stage, right? And that is an ambitious goal. That's very aligned to making money, right? To be on stage, getting booked, public that speaking is a lucrative thing. I know I've done public speaking courses. Yeah, and at 26, you got to figure out how that works for you, right? And it will have a special way. If you're a projector, right, it's going to feel very different from other energies like manifestors or generators because it's actually not authentic for you to be so forthright perhaps with that, you've got to shine.
Yeah,
But what's
yeah,
interesting is you're a projector, right? And so the three is like antithetical to the projector, actually. The three is like because the projector sign of success, their what is it? Their sign of success is success, right? When you're
yes.
success, when you're successful, that means you're really being a projector, and that means being recognized. That means being
Mm,
recognized.
yep.
And um, the projectors are more like I'd say they're more like this. They're more like part fives. There's a deep feeling of inadequacy that they've have to overcome in their lifetime. Uh, Fear of the unknown and but also a great visionary is able to see investigation, um, you know, understanding, insight, discovery, knowing, all this stuff of the part five is very projectory, in my opinion. And but the five is, yeah, they've got inadequacy, and they're kind of like the reversed three. The three is like the outward expression. They've got like a, yeah, they've got shame and they feel valueless, but they overcompensate. They go the other way. They go into, oh, I've got to prove I'm the best. And they go out in the world and they prove it. Whereas they fear going into the world, the part five fear going into the world. They've got similar shame, inadequacy, but it operates very differently. It's from fear, fear of the unknown. And so they actually hide and retreat and don't show off their gifts, right? And so that's
Yeah,
the part
that means
five, and the projector's destiny is to like actually start embodying their wisdom and their gifts and start shining their light and like sharing it, and then it'll get recognized, and then they'll get invited, hopefully invited to lots of speaking. And
and that's what I hope getting the books and the courses onto Teachable does that I can shine all the things I've been successful at, let that be making money for me while I get seen and recognized by people that enjoy the speaking things enough to get it to be a powerful keynote.
yeah, beautiful. It sounds like you're on the right path. Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to finish it up soon. Is there anything else you guys want to know? I know I kind of focused on some types or parts, but not all of them.
I think doing the scanning of all the different parts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, would be
Okay. We'll we'll we'll,
wonderful.
we'll do it very briefly then. Thanks for encouraging me to do that. Um, okay, we'll start with the one that I didn't have here. So as you know, so top right here, the part one. Okay. And these are the keys associated with it. I'm just going to look over it very quickly, but it's about perfectionism, judgment, rigidity, obligation, hypocrisy, and real shadow when they're dishonoring their own values, but judging others. Limitation or restriction, being pedantic or overly fussy on details and rules and all that. And then in the light, there's consistency, they can be very routine, regimented. Uh, there can be lots of integrity and credibility. They see what needs improved. They care about reformation and improving things. And they've got a great sense of honor and commitment and duty. And they can be very purposeful about what they do, very intentional, and like there's a real reason and purpose for what they do, and they can embody virtues. It's the one. And as I said, the core wound here is feeling corrupt, defective, imperfect. And they're here to be brilliant, to shine like a diamond, and to stand for essential truth, value, and justice, to be a role model, to bring about justice, and to enact change that has integrity, lasting change. Beautiful. So that's one. Let's look at two. So two, they're known for overgiving, flattery, people pleasing, being a doormat, like being permissive, just allowing people to like drain their energy and just like, energy vampires, wet dream, basically. They love listening to people, but they can be like fawning, like just like if they just being overly nice. Um, they can also give conditional love, like giving to get, like because they want love and attention. They actually like, I'm going to give you this because I want this, because they're deep down, they're needy and they're self-neglected. They've neglected their own needs and they don't know how to give to themselves in shadow. And so they really hope and expect others give to them, and that their good deeds will go noticed and that they'll be returned to them. That's the thing. Like unconsciously or even sometimes consciously, they can be counting about all the good things that they've done and how they deserve to be reciprocated, right? That's the shadow. It's not unconditional giving. There's a need. It's because they've got unmet needs. Deep down, they feel unworthy and they've not got the love and attention that they really needed as a child, right? I didn't get enough love and attention from my mother, but I only got love and attention like Pavlov's dog when I was helping my sister or helping my mom. And so giving got conditioned as good behavior, you know? That's when I knew I was loved because my mom said, good boy. But ultimately, the two is the gateway to the real path of service. Like the path of service that everyone knows and talks about in the spiritual community, to give unconditionally, to give compassionately, to see the other as you in drag or God in drag, and that to give to one is to give to all and to give selflessly, because it's the path of the Buddhas. Even Jesus Christ is a good example, right? Being totally altruistic, outward facing, and seeing that we are actually, it's all one, it's unity. The loving awareness that we are one and that service to others is God's work is like seeing we're all one and that we don't need to be selfish. We can give to others because we're giving to ourselves, really. If we're really embodying the highest nature, the truest unified nature, it's like it always comes back, and we can be sustained by that unconditional giving. But other beautiful qualities is this unconditional giving nature that radiates love and care for others. I really love the word care, because care in esoterics is about where you put your attention on. And so wherever a two in light will put their attention is something they nourish what they care for with love. And everything they put their care like vibrates with health. And yeah, it's just a very, very beautiful quality, I think, to care for everything, to care for people and to give that way. Because it makes things healthier, it makes things vibrate higher. So yeah, it's all about love, giving, nurturing. You get the vibe. It's like very much the essence of a divine mother kind of archetype. And the shadow is like feeling unlovable or unwanted and needing to be needed, They can be a little bit possessive or manipulative because their whole sense of worth is about being needed, It's like, what does a mother do when their kids leave the nest? They can lose their shit. Like, some are happy and ready for it. Others are like, they get empty nest syndrome. They don't have anyone who needs them anymore. And so that can feel very difficult, very challenging. And there can be a pride with that, or feeling self-satisfied about your giving, kind of a smugness, like I'm kind, I'm good, being a good person. So that's the kind of essence of the shadow here. And they can feel emotionally drained, resentful, unloved, and hurt by others because others don't care as much as they do, This is kind of this bitterness about others not caring as much as they do. Beautiful. 3, we talked about that. I'll start with the shadow. It's about competition and needing to prove yourself. Like, they feel deeply valueless and that they need to do something in order to be valuable. It's all about doing with the type 3. So they have to earn their worth, prove their worth, earn recognition. They're seeking a validation because there's a deep insecurity or valuelessness. And so the way they do compensate for that is saying, hey, look at me, I'm the best, top of the class, best in sports, high performers, and they do fucking great. And they do materially successfully. But the sad thing is, most of it is driven by this deep shame that they don't feel valued and that they have to prove it. And that's why a lot of their victories can feel hollow and superficial and empty. But they keep continuing, and many continue to get gold medals or top of their class or top of a skyscraper and a CEO in a penthouse and still feel empty, because it's all been driven by this feeling of valuelessness, and the shame, the deep shame of that, right? So that's really the big insight. I love this three because it illustrates the Enneagram so importantly, is that if we don't address our pain, it's going to be our primary motivation in life. It's going to be the thing that drives us and all of our behavior. Not all of it, but a lot of our behavior, because the wound is seeking to be, the ego is trying to resolve this wound, but through not self actions and strategies, right? It's not authentic. When the ego is trying to resolve the wound, it's going to drive all this behavior. It could lead us into narcissism, superficiality, feeling superior. It's trying to compensate for the fact that it feels valuelessness. Cool. And we talked about the shining example, so we won't go into it, but there's the 14, which is about being autonomous, being highly competent, great at earning money and resources, being very driven. 54 is all about being driven, aspirational, ambition. 31, there's a lot of charisma. They've got a lot of attractiveness. They look shiny, a lot of celebrities, maybe type threes, particularly ones that have had to earn their way there, influencers. And so, but in shadow, there's also this, it's all about the image, they've got this vanity, this need to protect the self-image, and because it's the ego they're propping up, because deep down they still feel valueless. So they're trying to protect this image, and that can make them kind of deceitful or dishonest, and afraid of being really authentic and vulnerable. But that's a real pathway for them to go towards 9 and 6, but 9 to be authentic, right? Seeking the light of their true nature and letting that shine through. Cool. Let's go to 4. So 4s are the artists. They call the tragic romantics sometimes. They're so in their feelings and their body. I love 4s. They're so expressive and passionate about just feelings, and you can really feel them. And I guess for me, feeling emotionally restricted in my life and detached, I loved feeling 4s because I couldn't feel myself, like, emotionally, but I loved feeling I had the empathy of a 2, so I could feel 4s a lot, and it made me really resonate with just their passion, and being expressive, even if they were being sad or melancholy, which they're prone to do, or being moody. I just like the vibrancy of being a person who feels a lot. I think it's a beautiful thing. And that's why in the highest expression, it's all about that. It's actually really embodying what it means to be human with all of our emotionality. What we know about humans is that we're like pretty much the only emotional creatures in the universe. That's what I heard once. Like, we're here, we've got emotions, and we hurt, and we go through pain and darkness and suffering. But like, the 4s in the highest, they hold that with grace. There's a real holding and naturalness to their pain. They show us how to feel. Actually, they show the rest of us how to feel. They're like teachers in feeling. Like, it's not to be afraid of. Emotions are to be embraced and embodied and expressed. And chaos as well. They can. There's the line 3, the gate 3 here. Chaos and instability and wreck. They can be a mess, but they're fine in it. And it can be beautiful. Beauty is what, and what I also like about 4s is that 3s are all about success. That's what they're aspiring towards. Like, 4s really care about beauty and authenticity and originality and uniqueness. That's what makes them an artist. They care about aesthetics and making the world a more beautiful place. And I think that's a real beautiful, admirable thing to care about. In a capitalist world, it's more about beauty here. And yeah, in their purity, there's a return to a purity of unique essence of the child, of innocence, of all wonder and grace. They love and appreciate life. In the shadow, there's envy. They can be envious of others, but they can also later in life they appreciate others in life. But the real shadow is victimization. It's feeling helpless, ashamed of self, complaining and they want to be saved because they were abandoned as a kid. There's an abandonment wound, if not literal, definitely emotional or past life. And so this feeling of abandonment, which is maybe I'd say the deepest wound of all the core wounds. And if we really want to awaken to enlightenment, to really have self-realization, we have to meet our four, and that's our deepest pain. We have to go into the heart and the wound of abandonment we have there. We all left the Garden of Eden. We all left the garden, and so there's this wound of becoming separate but feeling abandoned and suddenly feeling flawed. The fours feel flawed now because they're human. And they can feel insignificant or invisible, and like this wound that I don't belong here. And so that's really what they're seeking. They're trying to seek belonging and significance through the art, through their creativity, through being a unique person, and they care about being seen as unique and special. They want to be special. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's enough of four. Some of the gates there. 22 is a big one, entitlement and honesty and grace. 25, envy, appreciation, innocence. 33, alienation or withdrawing, because they're also a self-image type, so they care about their image as well, and so they can withdraw and hide their emotions, thinking no one gets me, no one understands me, I'm so unique, and they can be quite self-pitying. But yeah, they've got a great capacity to regenerate and self-renew when they take responsibility for their emotional state. Beautiful. Let's go to 5. So 5s, associated with a line 1 here, a deep feeling of inadequacy and feeling deeply incompetent, incapable to face the unknown. This is a deep fear that many of us have, to like the unknown, and like trying to prepare and overcompensating. That's another shadow that I should write in here, actually. Overcompensating for the feeling of inadequacy to face the unknown. So what they do is like they become very studious. They learn a lot. They become highly competent or masters or proficient in one thing because they have to. They feel they will not survive otherwise. They have to become very competent. And so, but it's all because they're afraid of the unknown and feel like they're incapable to face it. So there's the uncertainty here. There's the fear of rejection and being misunderstood. And there's the pattern of investigation, observing, seeking, and they're withdrawing to seek knowledge. They can become very isolated and reclusive in order to become competent. There's like the image of the scientist or the inventor in the basement, down there for years trying to crack something and hiding his inventions because he doesn't feel like they're going to be understood or accepted yet. And so the challenge for them is to bring it into the light eventually and not overcompensate too much and miss the opportunity or the divine timing to bring their inventions to the world or their visions to the world, to see patterns, prophecies, secrets, and solutions that no one else can. That's what the 5 can do. And then mention pioneering new ways of doing things and new ways of seeing things. You've got a great curiosity of analyzing how things work. Like line 1's getting to the root, understanding how things work. And yeah, they're interested in knowing, because knowing is the antidote to the unknown. So they're always orientated towards knowing, right? That's what gives them certainty. They find safety in knowing and understanding stuff. When they don't know, they feel unsafe. And I was on retreat recently and I didn't know what was being taught sometimes. Yeah, I wanted to know the knowledge, because I didn't trust it yet. Like I have to know why they're doing things the way they are, because I'm a knowledge seeker and I appreciate knowledge. It makes me feel safe. It orientates me and makes me accept things, you know? So they're very mind orientated here. The most mind orientated, where the 4 is the most heart and feeling orientated in the body, heart and feeling. 5 is the most detached and mind orientated. So we got a lot of head and ajna types here, parts. You know, we got the 24, we got the 11, we got 61 from the head. So the 6 we talked about is like the stereotypical traditional conformist human. The 6 is actually interesting because it's actually here's about safety. That's the big thing here, right? And I don't know if it's highlighted enough in Enneagram theory enough, but it's really about feeling unsafe. One of the things that I connected, it's known as a head type, but did I do it? But yeah, one of the transmissions that came through is that 6 is not just a head type, it's connected to the spleen in human design. And that changes our understanding. I think it deepens our understanding of it, right? Because the spleen is where it holds all the fear. And that means it's like a gut type actually as well. It's actually instinctually afraid of things, but it compensates for its deep fears and inadequacies with the head and strategies of the mind, right? But it's actually motivated by the spleen. And so that's quite different from what Enneagram theory talks about. It's not motivated by the head. The head is the strategy, but the motivations are the fear it feels in the body, the deep fears of death and danger, of ostracism and exile. These are deep ancient fears: fear of the unknown, fear of abandonment, fear of the past or the future, fear of loss of support and care, fear of loss of security and safety, right? So really, 6s are very incredibly anxious people. They're always worrying about the future and thinking about all the things that could go wrong, you know. These overthinking can lead to self-fulfilling prophecies of crisis, right? They worry about the worst and sometimes they bring it about because they fear it so much. Yeah. But their whole thing is about preparing, and so they can be very good at thinking into the future, and so that's why they make great strategists, great planners. You know, what else? The other way they protect from their fears is by making alliances and being loyal to beliefs that make them feel safe, loyal to people and companies and ideas and groups that make them feel safe. So they can be very loyal, and they're actually great team players. You know, they've got some of the things here we look at. We got 44 of teamwork, you know, in shadows, we got hypervigilance, but they can be great team players. There's another one of synarchy as well, is to do with them. So yeah, they're fearing failure and loss as well, because that can jeopardize their security. It's all about maintaining security and feeling safe. And what it gives them is strategy, organization. But the real medicine here is learning to trust, is overcoming self-doubt and suspicion and coming into trust and discernment. That's the medicine. Trust. Learning to trust. And we need to trust not just with the head, but with every fiber of our body, because it's our cells that don't trust. There's so much doubt in the body and fear and insecurity that needs to be addressed. And trust, like, it's kind of like faith. Like, we have to just have faith that things are good, that life is supporting us, that we are supported, we're not abandoned, we're not cast out of the garden, that we are one with God and all that. And so the 6 is forgotten that because it does represent the separate self, the ego, you know, the one that chose to be separate. And so in shadow, it's lost faith and it can be very pessimistic. In light, it can be very trusting, so attuned to trust that it becomes aligned to synchronicity and to the needs of the group. And so that's why they can bring about their level of trust can bring about things like synergy, or group harmony, group flow with the amount of trust that they can have, right? That's really a vision for unity. Or for me, it would be what the sixth wraith of man that Richard talks about is like really this embodied type six, right? When the six stops being in the head and shadow and really becomes embodied and lives as if unity consciousness. For me, that's the sixth wraiths, and that's why, in a future transmission, I'm going to talk about six being the new nine, six being the purpose here of this work to be embodied, and the union of masculine and feminine, Interestingly, the six is been hard to define because they're quite schizophrenic. They're everything, they're like, they can be passive and aggressive. They can be strong and weak. They can be all the opposites, right? And for me, that's about one, not feeling safe, and two, the division between masculine and feminine. And so that's one of the higher purposes of this work that I want to get people towards. Once I get to the basics, is helping people connect to safety and to union between these polarized parts of masculine and feminine. All right, that's enough of that one. So we had a latecomer, Jennifer. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. It's really early here. Sorry.
Okay, it's okay.
I'm in the US.
Yeah, well, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you'll watch it on catch up because we're almost done. But perhaps maybe you came in at the exact right time. I don't know if you're type 7 or part 7, but we're going to talk about this one now. So I know all about this, and I've talked a lot about it during this transmission or this workshop. Addict, enthusiast, lover, right? They've got a need. They're all about escapism, indulging the impulses and desires for pleasure and fun. And I hate pain and responsibility. They're all about being free and spontaneous and being a social butterfly, enjoying experiences, enjoying life and savoring life. They just love fun, pleasure. But what they don't like is feeling pain, and they've got really no inner worlds in shadow. And they don't look inward. They're always distracted and busy and moving on to the next thing because they don't want to feel what's going on inside. And they can't feel because it's too much for them. Because they've got this, ultimately it comes from this root wound of deprivation, feeling nothing, numb, empty, hungry, devoid of love and feeling. And one day I'll go into more of the core wounds and what they really mean, but they are important, for me as a healer to understand, like, how does someone have this wound of deprivation? Like, what is the evidence of that in someone's childhood, for example? Deprivation for me was literally being deprived of my mother's milk. I didn't get fed because my mom was too anxious. Like, I didn't take to her breast because, yeah, she was anxious and full of fear. And I guess I was sensitive enough to feel it and I didn't attach. And so I was literally deprived of nourishment. And so that leaves a child, there's deeper reasons, more esoteric reasons, but on a human physical plane, that leaves a child feeling empty, hungry, devoid of love and feeling. And so the rest of their life is going to be orientated towards filling themselves, that emptiness that they feel. And they've got this fear of emptiness. So, but what they feel fills it is pleasure, stimulation, But just to talk about some of the medicine is actually going into the emptiness, into the deprivation and meeting that emptiness. But before they get to that, the sevens are notorious for feeling bored, right? This is a protector emotion, right? Feeling bored stops them from really feeling, because before they feel the actual pain that they have in their body and their trauma, they feel bored. And so they always stimulated into action, into busyness, to restlessness, they're and hungry for more. And so they're never going deep into their pain, unlike the four who feel everything all the time, pretty much, quite a lot of the more open fours. Sevens are like the opposite of four. They're like so externally focused, because they feel bored. They've got these protectors in stopping them from feeling. They can be impulsive, prone to addiction, getting into overindulgence, but they can feel dissatisfied and apathetic, and they can be a slave to their desires. But in their purity, you know, they're full of joy, full of optimism, full of light, and they show what life's all about, like really enjoying life. You know, we're here to have fun, enjoy, be happy. And they're all about being happy. You know, that was the meaning of life for me during my 20s and late teens. I was like, that's the meaning of life, to be happy. And it's because I was a 7 at that time, that age. And so another reason is about fulfillment. This is a bit more truly grateful for life. They have a filled cup overflowing with love. You know, fulfillment is about receiving, getting, appreciating what you have. The energy you put in comes back to you. Like, you love life and you feel fulfilled by it. And you know, these 7s are usually enthusiastic about everything, and they can be very passionate and versatile. And in their higher states, they can feel alive and sensual. You know, they're very embodied and they appreciate pleasure. You know, the 7s are called the lover, and they could also be called the tantric queen or king. You know, like they could be 7s like myself are quite drawn to tantra as a devotional path, or a path to enlightenment or union, because they like pleasure and they like experiencing life, and they want to be embodied and alive. They don't want to transcend life. They want to go more into life. And they do have a tantric channel here with the 46, and they may have another. Some of the ones feeling scattered, shallowness or superficiality, temptation, impulsiveness, escapism, gratification. There we go. Beautiful. Being deeply immersed in experience, right? And that's associated with the line 3 there. All right, so the leaders here, we talked a lot about this one, so I won't do too much of it. But associated with the line 5, it's all about power, dominance, willpower, and shadow control, right? These people can be very heroic and great leaders for society. And when they step into the power and let go of this aggressiveness and dominance that they've got here, you know, they can be quite magnanimous and generous spirits, actually. You know, they're people with big hearts that you can feel safe in their presence and feel protected by them. You know, they could be a great pillar of a community. Here's some of the keys. All right. And lastly, I'm going to finish promptly after this. We're going to, we've talked about this avoidance. So avoidance, big thing here. Really, they feel unsafe. There's a sensitivity to conflict, anger, and loss. And yeah, I feel I need to close soon. So I'm just I've reached my capacity, my limit. You know, I think that's 3 hours now on the dot. So I'll just say this: the 9 is like, in its purity, is like a pure channel for your consciousness, for your unique essence, who you're designed to be in this lifetime. And so really moving to 9 is about being a receptive channel, a pure vessel for who you really are. So that's why it's at the top, right? It's not about being embodied like the 6, the vision I gave for the 6, right? The ultimate vision for 6. It's about being a pure channel and transcending the conditioning and everything else. And that's what we talk about here, the impurity. But also they're very peaceful by nature, great diplomats. You know, they got the 6 here. And yeah, they're here to be equanimous. You know, they're always conflict avoidant. That's their big thing, avoiding the experiences designed for one's healing and growth. But in their light, they're the most fearless in conflict. they can go into conflict and quell it with their presence. You know, there's a story I heard about a man going into an angry mob, but with pure peace in his heart and the desire for reconciliation and to apologize. And his sincere kindness, bringing peace into conflict, was able to calm an angry mob. You know, it's pure peace. That's the essence of a 9. But yes, they've not got in shadow, they've not got personality really. They're kind of very malleable and they do this thing called introjection, where they merge with other people and they copycat, or, you know, they're quite chameleon-like. You know, I was a chameleon when I was younger. I could be whatever made me accepted most and what caused the least friction. I had the sensitivity to detect what was needed, and I could be that, you know, and that could be like playing small or being funny or not saying my truth or whatever. You know, that could be the shadow hiding. Beautiful. So that's the 9, right? And I'll highlight these: passivity, effacing, hiding yourself, self-denying rather than self-accepting, indolence or laziness, obstinance, being like really stubborn, but you don't know why. Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. I'm going to stop speaking now, stop sharing. Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening for this length of time. And yeah, appreciate the interactivity and you sharing your stories and getting involved. Hope this is going to be helpful for people. Oh. Any more to share before we sign off, Carrie or Melanie? No. Beautiful.
No, this has just been wonderful for me. I don't know what woke me up at 2 o'clock in the morning to find you. I have no idea how that happened, but I certainly am glad that it did happen.
Well, me too. Thank you for your contributions, Carrie, and thanks for the kind of words. And yeah, and amazing that you were able to stay up for 3 hours after getting up at 2 a.m. There you go.
I'll probably nap today.
Yeah. Okay, good. You've done your work. Well, lots
Thanks.
of love. Thank you so much, and thanks, Jennifer, for joining. I'll send up the replay very soon. Much love.